Isabelle, why are we here today?
Because I asked you to talk with me about Thomas Crown Affair.
Boobs.
Rene Russo boobs.
But Pierce Brosnan, but
I was about to say Pierce Brosnan, but Rene Russo boobs. Can I make it any more obvious?
excellent. I need you to explain something for me.
Yeah.
So I'm normally the DJ. I'm normally spinning the vinyl, picking the movies, but every once in a while you do. You selected Thomas Crown
Mhm.
Affair. It's not really a surprise to me because I know that you love John McTiernan. What I need you to explain, and I like John McTiernan too, don't take this in that sort of way. I think that is John McTiernan is actually really respected in like certain film circles.
Yeah, he's
And maybe people
beloved.
watching are like, why is the Die Hard and Predator guy like so like why am I seeing his name more? Why are people who are serious about movies interested in engaging with him? Give us a rundown of like
Um,
what makes John McTiernan cool.
I mean, I think for a while he's been pretty popular in European circles, which is no surprise because like the French always loved like genre filmmakers and like workman directors, and he is like the epitome of that. But he's just so strange and weird, and there's like so many like poetic gestures when he directs that I find compelling. I don't know. I guess the backstory is that when I was a teenager, I loved Die Hard, obviously, and Predator. Predator was my gateway into him. So I saw Predator, and it's such a weird movie the more you watch it. One of my favorite things ever written about it was an acquaintance of mine, John Latonin, who talked about how like it's interesting because it really starts with all these like metaphors and like symbols and like iconography you recognize if you watched movies at that period in time, like the 80s. So like Arnold movies, guys with big guns, commandos, all that. And then all of a sudden by the end, you're like, wait, I forgot all about that. And like all the themes it was setting up suddenly disappear, and all the story threads they were setting up just disappear. And all of a sudden, it's just like two guys in the mud naked, beating the shit out of each other. It's just this interesting return from like meaning and symbols to suddenly it's like a mythic and dawn of man like imagery. And I really responded to that as a teenager. I found it like so very different from like Terminator as far as Arnold movies I was into at the time. And then Die Hard is like the complete fucking opposite of that. Because Die Hard is like maybe the most musical action movie to ever come out of the United States. Like that is a movie where it's like beat for beat for beat, like everything just happens perfectly. Like everyone was operating on like full blast on that movie. Like the guys holding the cameras, the dolly, like everyone on that movie was like firing on all cylinders, which is funny because it's basically a movie about nothing. There's
Yeah.
no like meaning to Die Hard. It's a movie you watch just to see the parts move in such a beautiful way. And
In retrospect, you can see like Die Hard doing some really heavy lifting when it comes to like action vocabulary. But in
easily.
retrospect, um,
Yeah, no, it's a really unsuspecting movie because like there's a lot of movies that were big for me when I was a teenager, and I watch them now and I'm just not compelled by them. But I go back to
mhm.
Die Hard and it's still like I get into it, like the pacing does a lot of movies now that I'm like approaching 30 and I'm like watching movies I grew up watching. I'm like, I didn't realize how like fast this was, like when you're a kid, like your brain fills in so many gaps, and so you're like, oh wow, this is like high speed, this movie. But Die
Mhm.
Hard, I watch it and it still has that flow. Like it still feels like it moves so well. But it's just funny because it's like Predator is a movie that has almost an overabundance of things you can read into it about, and it doesn't really resolve any of those things. It's very like it becomes more and more abstract as it goes, and so it doesn't really help you. It makes sense that like French dudes loved it because, French critics, because it was something that they could like pick apart that in a way that wasn't easy to pick apart. And then Die Hard, on the other hand, is like a classic, you know, um, journeyman film in that it's like exquisitely made movie that has nothing really to convey or say. It's just you're watching it for the beauty of the way it's put together in form. And so but for so long anyway, I'm rambling. Those two were like the only ones I knew. And so a couple of years ago, I was just like, I really want to like explore more of what McTiernan did because I have this sense that like there's more to, find there. And I found stuff I like. Nomad is fun. Die Hard 3 is pretty good, but not as good as the first one. It's
Well,
really,
we'll talk about With a Vengeance a bit more because I think that's like
yeah,
spiritual, like
yeah,
starting
for
point to
sure.
Thomas Crown.
I even really love Rollerball. Rollerball is chaotic and goofy and
Yeah, but
really,
once we start talking about heist, like composition, like it's Die Hard with a Vengeance, but like perfected
yeah.
within Thomas
Yeah,
Crown
because
Affair.
what I loved, so I watched Thomas Crown Affair as part of like this journey into McTiernan, and I was like, I just kind of watched it on a whim. I was just like, it'll probably be goofy and silly. It'll probably be like James Bond 90s vibes, and I fucking loved it. I fucking adored this movie. And the more I thought about it and the more I watched it, the more I liked it. Like it gets better when I return to it. It reaps so many rewards. But I think what I like so much is that it kind of pulls from all these different aspects of McTiernan's work. Like there's this like Die Hard, it's just about how well constructed it is and well put together it is, and how every shot kind of moves into the next shot in a really compelling way, and he really experiments with framings in really beautiful ways. But then it also has that Predator feel of like it's something beyond just symbolism and like thematic interests that are conveyed through a story. It feels like there's something kind of primal in this, in this case, in the case of Predator, it's this like dawn of man against nature thing and all these images that invoke that. But in Thomas Crown, it's obviously just like pure horny. There's something kind of like primal in its sense of sexuality that I find really compelling because it's something like I don't know how to explain like what this movie is about. I just know what it's compelled by and interested in and what John McTiernan put into it, which was a whole lot of libido. This
Oh
is
yeah.
like the horniest movie ever made and possibly the coolest movie ever made. It's just so compelling.
I think the sexuality of the film is really unique. And what I'd like to say real quick is that 1999 was a massive year for McTiernan. I love The 13th Warrior. I
That's
love
one I
that
need to
movie.
see. I haven't seen it yet.
Came out the
It's next on
same
the
year.
list.
He's like
Yeah.
firing on all cylinders at that point. Was he about to go to prison or something? Was he
No, he
like
went to
trying to make
prison in the
bank?
mid 2000s. It happened because on Rollerball, which again I think is a very underappreciated movie, especially today when it's basically a documentary about the NFL. But he I guess thought that one of the producers on Rollerball, I think, was like screwing him over or something, and so he paid someone to stalk him around and got caught and brought to court, and the court trial went on for a while. So while he was in court to decide if he's going to prison or not, he made his last movie. Um, he made Basic with Sam Jackson, I think, which I
Oh
had
wow.
and then he went to prison. Upon getting out of prison, he made it very clear he had every intention of returning to film. He got a screenplay, he got producers. He was about to start production on a movie called, I think, Tau Ceti. It was going to be a space movie, kind of like I think a Ghosts of Mars type movie. And then COVID happened, and all the funding disappeared and now the future is unclear, and we might not get another one. To my knowledge, he is still trying to make that movie happen, but when COVID happened, basically all the money disappeared, and now it's been a process of trying to get producers again for something he had already gotten producers for, but then lost them. So he's kind of in a tough position, but he might come back. But anyway, that will yeah. So Thomas Crown was like near the end of his era. It was kind of like he was no longer as popular as he used to be, but he was still, old, reliable in kind of like a Wolfgang Peterson way, where I'm sure like he was on a long list of directors that when people had a script they just needed someone reliable to do, they probably sent it to him. I think he was still kind of in that position, but 99. So I'm not surprised he got two movies done that year. I
They're both very good movies. Pierce Brosnan in this movie. Let's go into it. Let's talk about the Thomas Crown Affair.
I
Um, the way you sold it to me was something along the lines of like a thief or like a criminal gets turned on by the fact that he's being hunted by
Oh no, it's the movie is Dennis Leary is horny for Renee Russo, and he's horny for her because he sees how horny she is for Pierce Brosnan, and Pierce Brosnan is horny about getting a painting and the thrill of being hunted by this woman who herself is being hunted by this other guy. And Thomas Crown is just this guy who's turned on by this whole spider web of desire at play. Like he
Yeah,
sees what's happening and he's like, "Oh, this is fun." You know, like he's turned on by it, by the joy of all of it. And yeah, that's how I would describe just a really horny movie where everyone in it is horny all the time for everyone
absolutely.
else.
And
And
we know it's a remake. We know
yeah,
I didn't watch the original. I watched
I
like the
never.
trailer and some clips, and it looks like Norman Jewison is with some interesting composition. It looks erotic as well, but you know that
I'm not
could just be
surprised.
Faye Dunaway being hot as hell. Who was
Yeah.
in this movie? It was like the
As
first person we hear, I think. Yeah,
the
yeah, it's interesting
sarcastic,
that she's like literally the therapist, so it's almost like the original movie
she's
is
like
like holding the
psychoanalyzed.
remake. Yeah, the original movie is holding the remake in a therapy session, trying to help it find its identity.
Well,
Like,
it's also funny because she's psychoanalyzing someone that she has like she's so wealthy and the person she's seen is so wealthy that it's impossible for her to take the job seriously anymore. So
yeah,
it's more just like two people like having a beer and yucking it up when he goes to therapy. There's like no seriousness to it.
since it's such an erotic scene, uh, all the characters feel like they want to fuck each other if they have a conversation with each other. And like the movie does play on that as well because we often see Pierce Brosnan with this young blonde model.
Yeah.
And like, I think we're just supposed to obviously assume either by the built-in persona of James Bond or by how horny the
Yeah.
fucking movie is that everyone's fucking each other,
And
you
then that's
know?
the one relationship that's actually innocent
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
positive, which is that he's like her spoiler, her father, kind of like a surrogate father or like a father figure. He I think like has financially supported her for many years and through like education and stuff. Which is so funny, which is because Renee Russo rightfully assumes they're fucking because she's like, this guy fucks anything with a pulse.
Yeah. And I do think that the film is playing with it's better. I wish that a James Bond movie was this rich in its like
Well,
erotic sophistication. I really
'cause
do.
I don't really give a shit about James Bond. I never did. But the one that I always liked was GoldenEye.
Yeah.
And I haven't seen it in like 12 years or something. It's been a long time, but I always remember that as the one that I liked. And I liked it, one, because it was just so 90s, and I really like 90s action movies and thrillers and the like De Palma's Mission
Yeah.
Impossible and stuff like
I
that.
like it because I want to be crushed in between Famke Janssen's thighs. That's how I'd like to die if I could pick.
Exactly. I don't know. I just liked how stupid it was. Like Pierce
Yeah,
Brosnan's
it's pure
like
camp.
the Pierce Brosnan is like to me definitive James Bond. Like that's who I think of because he literally is real life like he's actually just like that.
Yeah.
As opposed to like Sean Connery or Daniel Craig. I always think of Pierce Brosnan, and so I was seeing him basically kind of almost play on that character because it kind of feels like the movie is engaging with his image as James Bond a little
Yeah,
bit.
yeah.
That's part of it.
And engaging with the limitations of James Bond because
Yeah,
like I don't think it'd be until Spectre that Bond would get a girl that was even close to his age, really, like with
yeah.
Monica Bellucci being in that one. And Rene Russo, dude, no director has ever thought she was this sexy, and I've never thought she
Oh,
was sexy before this movie, and I've seen her a thousand
I
times.
I would talk to you about it. I've been talking to everyone about it since I watched this again a few days ago for like the past week. That like I love that it's such a foreign concept today to have a movie where you can that has just two people in their mid 40s constantly naked on screen, not always during sex scenes. There's scenes where they're just hanging out and talking about like stealing paintings and they're just her tits are out and it's fucking wonderful. Like middle-aged women don't get to be horny and in movies, rarely ever, let alone today. And she gets to be so horned up in this movie. Like she wears literally like a see-through dress on one scene and is like grinding up on Pierce Brosnan. It's like I love this. I love that a 40 mid-40s woman gets to do this. It's awesome.
Love that McTiernan's showing how easily that could be pulled off. Like you don't have to do the easy thing with like the blonde model. We can
Yeah.
eroticism exists for middle-aged people who love to watch heist capers. Like, and it exists in a pretty rich and sophisticated way as well. Especially if we're talking about artistry. The whole point, yeah, is that he stole a painting, a beautiful painting, and the eroticism depicted within the film, especially when they first make love or fuck
Yeah.
each other, is just so
It's the set piece. It's the center set piece of the
it's
movie.
literally done in the center, like the centerpiece of
Well,
the house of the mansion too, like upon the stairs, and like it's just so well done. Yeah, that is the centerpiece of the film
I
too.
think I literally told you that too. Like my pitch was like it opens with maybe one of the coolest heist scenes you'll ever see. Then it's about an hour and a half of people horny, and then ends with one more epic
Yeah.
set piece heist scene that actually doesn't matter. And
Basically, in Die Hard with a Vengeance, I wish that John McClane and fucking Simon, I wish that Jeremy Irons and Bruce Willis just fucked each other in the back of a cab. Like, just
literally, like that's what it feels like because it's she's so disinterested in the normal process that like this doesn't take place in anything resembling real life.
that's something interesting about McTiernan is that he understands obviously the action genre to a T, and I don't, and there are obvious homoerotic qualities to so many of like the macho action movies,
Oh,
and
of
I think
course, Predator is famous
exactly, I
for.
think McTiernan does it like almost deliberately though, like based on what I saw in Thomas Crown Affair, like he sees the built-in eroticism between cat and mouse, and I mean Hans
Yeah.
Gruber wants to fuck John McClane.
He's
Predator
in
is very
general
much like
really
that.
aware of how genre works, I feel like, because like in Die Hard with a Vengeance, when he's doing the like angry, the supervisor in the police station, like, punching the tail and being like, "You're a road cop, McClane. Don't believe." Like when he does that, it feels tongue in cheek. It feels like he gets that it's a fucking cliche at this point, and he's like kind of knowingly playing with that. And I think he did the same thing, yeah, with Predator, because it's just like you can't have this many roided up, jacked, tough guys with oiled up biceps hanging out and not have it be extremely homoerotic. And I mean, he does that with other things in that movie too, because obviously it's like a parody of the military. It's the military is the inferior power in that movie. They're disempowered. And so he does that a lot. And yeah, and Thomas Crown, that's like he's like there's something fundamentally erotic about like
Yeah,
he's basically saying maybe all heist movies are actually erotic thrillers, you
yeah.
know.
No, absolutely. And this film gets to follow through upon that premise, and that premise is the point of the movie.
Hmm.
Um, I think it's just incredible. So, yeah, Renee Russo is dazzling in the movie. I love her introductions. I love like the needlessly mysterious quality that McTiernan first introduces her with. Like, why she's an insurance agent, right? Like, why is she the most
Well,
mysterious person in the room? Maybe because it is that sexual. Obviously, the cat is here.
yeah.
It's so expressive when we first see Renee Russo. Her glasses, the lighting, like
I
the
also
few words.
I don't know if you noticed, but she's first introduced way in the background too.
Yeah,
The way the shot is framed is that Dennis Leary, and I forget the who the other actor was, the other cop that they're talking. He's a guy I know. That's why I'm mad. I can't remember his name. But they're just talking in the foreground, so you're led to assume like Dennis Leary is like your main cop guy throughout the movie. And she's like 30 feet back in the background, and you just see her walk in, and then with every shot she's like a little bit closer until she like invades the scene almost upon
yeah.
arriving.
Well, we're both attracted to women, right? So I think that like McTiernan understands. Well, he understands like the impulse of a guy who Thomas Crown Affair, I think, is a guy movie, and like you're gonna look at the woman like
Yeah. No, this is a
within
movie
that
for the
frame
girls.
setup.
What are you talking
I
about?
don't think so. Well, for a minute I thought that because when they first like fucked, I'm like, okay, I'm only seeing Pierce Brosnan and explicit ass right now. But then they gave me the boobs and I was fine. I mean, I
Yeah.
was fine either way, but I'm like, okay, maybe this is made for the girlies, I guess.
Yeah, it's a little
Um,
bit.
that might be like a silly piece of insight, but I think it's worth mentioning. I think that McTiernan, this feels like a sophisticated movie, but it is playing on every like
Desire.
primal component of cinema itself. I think like
Yeah, specifically like Hollywood and
where the
John.
eye wanders, like he knows where the eye
Yeah.
will wander, and
He's
where and
giving
like
you what you want while
exactly.
also fulfilling his
And in a
own.
really healthy way because I'm not gawking at a fucking 19-year-old starlet. I'm gawking at fucking Mommy Russo. And
It's also just because like he designs shots so that when you are gawking, you're supposed to be gawking for the sake of what the moment is trying
mhm.
to convey. And I think it's really the whole movie is directed that way. Like
Well,
anytime you're like distracted by something, it's because he wanted you to be in that instant. And it's
well, I
really
think he wants you to not just be attracted to Renee Russo. I think he wants you to be like like mystified by her cinematically. That's why we see her so mysteriously when she first shows up, because I think McTiernan knows that if you give a woman mystery, then like the person's attracted to her will like naturally try to unravel it and become intimate with it, just like a great
yeah.
like painting. Like I think
Yeah.
that the painting is very important to this because I don't if I'm wrong I'll edit this out, but I'm pretty sure the original has to do with a simple bank robbery and the remake
Yeah.
is changed to a painting, and it has to be
Yeah.
deliberately, it has to be for a
Oh, I think
reason.
it's so significant. It's really really important because I mean when you get down to it, the movie like nothing actually happens in the movie. Like the opening happens and the ending happens and everything that happens in between is to everyone outside these central characters irrelevant, you know? It's not important to what happens, but that's because the movie is kind of like I don't know if you noticed, but there's not even really a resolution in a like he resolves the situation 10 minutes after the first heist scene. He
Yeah.
returns the painting like immediately. And so at that moment, like the story is over. Like 30, 40 minutes into the movie, the story ends and it becomes more about the pursuit itself. And that's why it's like when at the end of the movie and it just kind of fizzles out and you're just suddenly like, wait, no one's actually pursuing anyone anymore. And it's because it's just a movie about these two people, these three people really with Dennis Leary like pursuing each other. And then they just stop. And there's no like because they no longer need to, because it was never about like what's the solution to the crime. Because we saw the crime at the start. We know how he did it, and we then see how he undid it. And that was never the important part. The important part is the chasing each other around and the excuse for that. And so as soon as they no longer need to chase each other, the movie ends, which I think is more interesting. You know, we don't need to
Yeah.
find out like if he gets away with it or if they manage to escape or whatever.
And
It's
of
a
course the obvious like metaphor is the psychosexual relationship that exists between crime and justice, like
yeah,
obviously.
yeah.
And I think that's interestingly analyzed here. What do you think that the film is saying about the psychology, like sexual, idealized or otherwise, of middle-aged men in 1999? Like, what's it providing for the Pierce Brosnan mindset
I
in the
mean, it's
movie?
definitely like in its own way a wish fulfillment for
Yeah.
I mean, like what do we have comparatively today? Because like today the goal is always to de-age middle-aged guys. You know, Tom
Hmm.
Cruise's nebulous age in the Mission Impossible sequels, where his, you know, love interests are 30 years younger than him, and I don't know if he's supposed to be the same age as them or not, and stuff like that. Or like Iron Man, who's like perpetually like 40. You know, it's like it's crazy to see like Pierce Brosnan with like gray in his hair
Yeah.
and like pursuing a woman who has wrinkles on her face, you know, and it's just really interesting because it's like that they're like viciously attracted to each other, like
Hmm.
animalistically attracted to each other, and it's so interesting because I feel like that's kind of lost. Whenever we see stuff like that, it's always kind of like um the older they get, the more kind of like taboo it gets almost. But for Thomas Crown as a character, he's like if, in a weird way, because we might not think of like men as sexually repressed more often than women, but it's kind of interesting in this movie to be like, it's kind of shocking to see a man who's like approaching 50 feeling sexually liberated, but like
Hmm.
it feels like that's what he's trying to achieve in the movie is the capacity to enact his desires or fulfill his desires throughout the movie is like he's because he's bored, basically. I mean, I've compared this to Friends before as like kind of like a movie about Batman without the Batman part because he's basically just Bruce Wayne, the rich guy who gets what he needs by abusing his resources to like fulfill those things, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so I find that interesting is that it's just like it's the same thing. He's trying to fulfill himself sexually by doing this. And it's not just the chase and the heist. I think the reason they chose painting is because so much of the movie revolves around changing things from what they were. So many shots like do support that because like so many of the shots like do weird things. Like they'll start like a perfectly centered kind of 1 point perspective shot and then just like whips to the side and suddenly like the camera's gliding along Pierce Brosnan's arm and it's like really smooth and it does all these weird things that like every time you see a shot and you feel like you understand it, suddenly it changes in some way. And that's what he does at the end with the painting is that he shows them this painting again, but now it means something different because he took it away and gave it back and they didn't even know they were looking at it and like the paint drips away from it. And I don't know if that makes sense, but I feel like so much of the ending is that like he's like trying to provoke them to see this painting again in a new way. And that to him is kind of like a sexual fulfillment thing. I don't know if any of that makes sense. That's
No, it
just
absolutely does.
stuff perusing my mind while I watched it is that
Exactly.
he wants to teach people something, it kind of feels like by the
I think
end.
I have like a more sentimental, probably affectionate idea of what's going on, probably. Yeah. I think he's bored, obviously, but I think he's
Oh
bored
yeah.
because he's alienated, and same with Rene Russo.
Yeah.
I
No,
think
she
they're
did a good
both
job.
like these are two of the loneliest characters I've ever seen in a heist movie. Two of the
Yeah.
loneliest characters, and honestly, what they want or what Thomas Crown, what they both kind of test each other about is like um not only like honesty but commitment. So I think it's interesting in how it plays on James Bond in the sense that James Bond doesn't want to commit to anyone, whereas Thomas
Yeah.
Crown is like, I will come with me. I'll give the
I think
painting back. I want you.
his own therapist laughs at him for suggesting he might be willing
Yeah.
to commit to someone or something.
I think it's a film about two extremely lonely, alienated, and clever people who really do want to domesticate each other and want to spend the
Mhm.
rest of their lives together. I think the love story
Yeah,
is like really palpable
it
within it.
is.
And
No,
I think
that's
that it's
totally
saying a
true.
lot of things that are counterintuitive to the heist genre, to the action genre, and to the erotic thriller.
This is what like I feel like sorry, I'm trying to regain my what I was about to say. I'm so airy today. Oh my God. I keep almost saying
I
things and
didn't
then
sleep at all last night. I'm with you.
me neither. I kind of read Thomas as someone who was always desired like commitment and like long-term stability in a relationship, but it was almost like his social conditions were a roadblock to that, like being this wealthy guy who's gorgeous and can do whatever he wants is almost like it creates like social barriers that prevent him from pursuing like things like marriage or just commitment in general, even if it doesn't take that form. And so I find that's why I think like the whole thing is like at the end of the movie he escapes from this society, he leaves it. He leaves his wealth behind, his business behind, and all these things. Because even though he's successful, they prevent him from, in a weird way, being rich and powerful has prevented him from actualizing himself, prevented him from fulfilling his needs. You know, he wants to be able to settle down with this woman, and this is the only way he can do it, he feels like, is by like walking away from all of this in a really flashy, over the top way. Um, because
And
he is
same could be said of Rene Russo, right? Yeah.
exactly, because she clearly is bored by her
Yeah,
work.
we see how they interact with like I guess colleagues. Pierce Brosnan is just like overwhelmingly intellectual and can't even really get along with people he works with. He's just
Yeah.
smarter than all of them. And Dennis Leary is the simpiest simp that ever existed and just bores Rene Russo half to death.
And I can't tell if he's simping more for her or for Thomas. And by the end,
Dennis Leary, man, Jesus Christ.
I love
Um,
that they got him for this part. It's so good. He's like really, I think, understated in this movie. I enjoy him. He's funny. I like him because he's just like flabbergasted, but then at the same time he's like, I get it.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
he's like it makes perfect sense to him. Like he's not
Oh,
someone who's like
we've all had a simp moment. We've all gone, oh no, I get that. That's
yeah,
like
like
better.
he
That's cool.
sees this woman who's in attempting to just do her job, ends up leaving her livelihood and like everything she knows behind to run off on a plane to like Brazil or some shit with her boyfriend. And he's like, "Yeah, you know,
Well,
I
that's
do
one
the
of the more
same thing."
complicated things about like real life dynamics that are like that.
Yeah,
If you're
exactly.
competing for someone's affections, you'll end up sexualizing them in your head and like over sexualizing them even to the point where you're like, oh no, I get it. That's fine. Like I can't compete
Yeah,
with
like
that.
when Thomas Crown does all this, he's like, "Hey, I tried to do that, and I didn't get as far as you did." You know,
Yeah.
like he respects the game. He respects what they're trying to achieve. Because I mean, you find out in the movie that he himself is kind of unactualized. You know, like he failed marriages and such. He himself can relate to their kind of what other people perceive as like self-destructive actions on the part of both Rene Russo and Pierce Brosnan. He kind of relates to them both by the
Yeah.
end. Like he's like, I get it. He's like, I know why you're doing all this. It makes sense. And so I think that is an important aspect to the movie to like kind of ground their actions and because it is really over the top, obviously. Like it's
Mhm.
very James Bondish. They're going on these lavish, expensive vacations and these $1 million boat rides and jet skiing and stuff. And it's like it feels very far away from us, but then I feel like Dennis Leary is there to make you be like, but like you get where they're coming from and you understand why they're doing this.
And like, okay, so yeah, it's over the top, but it's also it has such an interesting balancing act because some
I
like
agree.
it's overstated in overstated ways. Like I'm thinking of Rene Russo's like undeniable like feminine like enigmatic qualities or like just powerful qualities because it's not necessarily that she's like a woman in a man's world. If anything, being in like a man's world amplifies her feminine qualities to a point where it's like the sexiest thing you've ever seen.
Yeah.
So like it's understated yet completely amplified at the same exact time.
It
Um,
almost feels like this is a world where misogyny does not exist.
right though, right? Because like it doesn't play into
Misogyny
certain
and
things.
sex discrimination does not exist in the world of Thomas
Because
Crown Affair, even among her coworkers. I mean, she goes back and they all have like an hour of video footage and photographs of her slutting it up with a person she's supposed to be helping arrest.
and
And
one of
all
the guys is
like,
like, good job, and then Dennis
yeah,
Leary
one
is
is like,
like,
good
well, you
job, and
are smarter than me. Like no one's
they're all like, hey, that was a nice dress. And it's like
like it
her.
doesn't play like it doesn't want to make the statements that are so commonplace to make in dynamics like this, which is why I might buy it as actually more genuine and maybe
It is
more
genuine.
affectionate, but like the affection works because it is so erotic, because it is
And
so palpable and sultry.
and I mean, obviously, what we're seeing from her is like presumably John McTiernan's idea of what an attractive woman is, but
Which
it's
is really interesting to think about because like that's not really available within Die Hard, Predator, Die Hard with a
no,
Vengeance. Like
they are
women
like
are not available actually.
Die Hard is like
Die Hard is his wife, and that's it.
And they're
Like the
borderline
sexual tension is
divorcing.
Hans Gruber wanting to fuck John McClane through the whole
Yeah,
movie.
it's that and Predator, it's Carl Weathers and Arnold Schwarzenegger wanting to fuck each other.
Yeah, Die Hard with a
Stuff will make
Vengeance
you a
is a
goddamn
fucking is
sexual
a buddy
tyrannosaurus.
cop movie, and they're like the sexiest
Yeah, I
character in
mean,
Die Hard with
there's
a Vengeance
literally
is Jeremy
one woman in
Irons.
Predator. I think there's
Yeah,
literally one
yeah.
woman in Predator, like the whole movie, and she doesn't really do anything. She's just there for like story reasons. But even then, like by the end, you kind of forget why she was there to begin
Which
with.
might lead you to falsely assume that McTiernan has like a somewhat sexist view of women, but then Thomas Crown Affair proves that couldn't be further from the
You know,
case.
this is what I was getting at a second ago, because I was like, this is t McTiernan's idea of an attractive woman and a strong, independent woman. So women may or may not agree about whether they think Rene Russo is like positive or negative. And I mean, like, people can give a million reasons either way. But I feel like the idea is ultimately he's like, look, I'm just a humble guy. This is what I think is attractive, and I want to make her confident in that
Hmm.
personality type. And so it's like I'm sure some people could understandably be like, I don't think this is like the most, pro-woman movie ever made or whatever, the least misogynistic movie ever made. I'm sure some people have issues with it, but it's more like the attitude he's bringing into it,
Yeah.
which is
Well,
that
it's
he's
more
like,
like
I want her to
directly
think.
compared to James Bond as well. Like everything
Exactly.
about it feels
Because
just
ultimate, yeah, exactly. Because then you're like, this is kind of like a reversal
yeah.
because in a way, it's like it almost starts to feel like Pierce Brosnan is the prize for Rene Russo rather than the other way around. Is
Right? I
that
mean, at this time, it must have been The World Is Not Enough was the Bond movie, and Denise fucking Richards was like a scientist in that movie. Like it was like
I mean,
pretty bad in
the,
the mainstream.
and don't forget, like for most of this movie, Thomas is basically the villain in
Yes.
like a storytelling sense. Like he's the quote unquote antagonist in this. Like even though you don't meet her until like 30 minutes into the movie, Rene Russo is basically the main character. And so when she finally like fucks Pierce Brosnan, it's like she has conquered him, you know? It's like she has won him as a prize in a weird way, which is like obviously the complete reversal of the Bond movie, which is when is Bond finally gonna get this chick in his bed? And I'm just compelled by that. I really like that. I think it's fun. Um, and he does similar things in Rollerball, but it's not as important there. Here, it's like the whole movie revolves around that.
Well, if
That
we follow the crime and justice like psychosexual metaphor to its ultimate conclusion, the film is even delightfully upper class anarchist. Like it's like
yeah.
pretty cool.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Because this is again, like I said, Predator. People have read into like Predator as being like a satire of the government and like the military machine. Um,
Mhm.
because it's like, you have the badass uber macho soldier guys who are all played by action movie characters and icons.
And
And then
bodybuilders and wrestlers.
exactly. And then by the midpoint, they're all completely infantilized and made into weak little lemmings to
Yeah, that's the
pick
interesting
off.
thing about masculinity with him. I'll go into
And
it later, but yeah.
and so I feel, but then at the end, but at the same time, it's like as the movie goes on, it kind of like that theme becomes less insisted upon because again, he starts to move more into this like allegorical place, man in fire at the dawn of time fighting the beast, and that
Sure.
becomes more the thing. And I feel like Thomas Crown kind of does the same thing where he's like he's even though there's always kind of this political undercurrent in his work, he's more interested in like the sensual, like material, tactile aspects to what he's making a movie about. And because of that, like Thomas Crown ultimately feels like a movie where like the legal system just does not exist or is completely incidental at best. Like we don't care about the legality of what anyone does in this movie. We don't care if Rene Russo's actions are in any way, shape, or form part of her job description.
I barely understood the insurance that she worked for and like what
It's so unclear. It's unclear and it doesn't matter. Like all it is like it almost reminds me of like silent cinema where they'd be like, and this is the cop. And it's just like you don't need
yeah.
to know anything more. He's just the cop. And it's like the same thing. It's like Renee Russo, the insurance lady. It's like you don't have to know who she works for. You don't have to know what her what is being demanded of
Like,
her.
well, that adds to like the alienation of the piece because our
Yeah,
symbol of justice is alienated from justice itself because she's working for an insurance company and not the law.
yeah. I
Like
mean,
even there.
we barely even know what Thomas Crown's business is. We at the beginning he does this like big merger sale or something. We don't know anything about it. It doesn't
Well,
make any
he's
sense.
alienated from crime, or like because he's not necessarily a criminal for profit. He's a criminal out of boredom and alienation. Like they're both alienated from
Yeah.
the function of their archetype. Like they're
Yeah, he's
both,
doing it for the fun of it. That's why they were like, who would go to all this effort to sell or to steal a Monet if they're not going to sell it? And she says only someone who really likes Monet.
I think there, there are interesting things to say about like the outcomes of Thomas Crown Affair as well, because we talk about Predator, Die Hard, Die with a Vengeance, 13th Warrior. These are
Yeah,
films where like the heroes are they barely fucking make it out of those movies,
yeah.
covered in blood, like limping around, shirts all open.
That's
Nothing,
the joy of Die Hard.
but fucking Thomas Crown doesn't even break a sweat.
But yeah, I mean the joy of John McClane in Die Hard, and I guess Arnold in Predator, is that like you as the movie goes on, they become stripped away. You
Yeah,
know, in both movies, they lose their equipment, they lose their weapons, they develop scars and injuries, and these things last to the end of the movie. It's not like Indiana Jones getting thrown off a car and then he just walks it off. It's like every
yes.
injury and thing that happens to them persists. Meanwhile, Thomas Crown is just fucking God. Basically,
Yeah.
he is effectively like omnipotent in this movie. It feels like.
And well, that's how it goes with to me, like Rene Russo being the true like I guess they're both heroes of the piece, but she's the one who's
She's the protagonist.
like emotionally though, going through some like a huge roller coaster at the end of the movie, thinking that she had betrayed Thomas Crown and she'd never see him again. So like in a way, she's like John McClane limping through the fucking Nakatomi
Yeah,
Plaza.
she's
Like,
emotionally stripped down. Because, like, I don't think it's incorrect to call him the antagonist of the movie, which isn't necessarily the same thing as calling him a villain.
right.
He's not necessarily a villain, but he's the person who knows what's going on. He has the answer to everything.
Yeah.
He
Well, I
could
think if
explain the whole
we
movie
look at
and then
like
nobody would care.
McTiernan heroes as being severely
Yeah,
damaged by the end of the picture, Rene Russo was about to be
exactly.
extremely damaged on that airplane until she heard
Exactly. I mean,
uh
all it really comes down to is you are always in her POV. In a way,
right.
even before she's introduced, like you only know as much as she knows or could ascertain based on like what's around her. We never get Thomas
So
Crown's
is John
like
McClane asking us to empathize with Rene Russo or
John
is John
McClane.
or is I'm sorry, yeah, is McTiernan trying to get us to empathize with Rene Russo or is it McTiernan trying to convince us to fall in love with Thomas Crown as well?
I think we are meant to see things from the way she sees things. And so I would say, yeah, he's trying to intoxicate you with Thomas Crown via the intoxication with Thomas Crown of banning Rene Russo's character. He's like she becomes intoxicated by him, and so he wants you to, by virtue, be fascinated. And it's not hard for that to happen because he's Pierce fucking Brosnan. He's
Right.
gorgeous, and he dominates like every scene he's in because he knows everything. He
And he's an
knows the answer
excellent
to everything.
idealized form for middle-aged men in the late
Yeah,
90s too. So
yeah,
like it's so smart in the idea that like the audience will like naturally assume the POV of
mhm,
Thomas Crown, but
mhm.
over time you don't realize that you end up inhabiting a more feminine perspective because you
He's
become
everything.
intimate with that archetype. So like I think when they fuck each other, that's when the POV changes
Yeah,
truly and you're with Rene Russo.
because
Like I don't know
yeah,
whether or not to trust Thomas Crown anymore.
exactly. He
So I don't know
constantly is
whether or not to
aware.
trust myself, is what it's saying too for the audience who assumes the
Yeah,
POV of Thomas.
I guess because like at the start you see how he does the heist, and so that kind of mistakenly leads you to
Yes.
assume that you know what's going on, but then it becomes immediately really clear that he knows things that you
And
don't.
we don't see, yeah, exactly. We don't see how he puts the painting back. We're with Rene Russo during the climax of the film. So we're just as clueless as she fucking is. We're
Yeah.
duped.
We don't know that there's a plot. We don't we see him return give them that painting, but because it happens right after the like prologue, we have no
Yeah.
reason to assume he is literally immediately returning the painting. It's ridiculous. And this is why I love the finale is because it's all this bombast for something. He all he really does is walk into the museum, walk around, and then leave. Like nothing actually
Yeah.
occurs.
Well, compositionally, I think it's so similar to Jeremy Irons, Simon Gruber, and his fucking Nazi compatriots
Yeah,
going into
no,
Fort
100%.
Knox. Yeah,
100% because I love that movie. It's really
me
good.
too. It's so fucking good.
It's not as good as the first one, but it's really good. I like how he turns like the whole city into like a playground and
Exactly. It's got such like a daytime, almost jazzy feel, which obviously the Thomas Crown Affair perfects.
yeah, I mean it
So,
samples Nina Simone for like every song you hear in it. Like
yeah.
the my favorite is that they actually play a bit of Sinner Man at the start of
Yeah.
the movie as he's finishing up the heist, the first one, and then right as the scene ends, you hear her harmon Nina Simone's voice harmonizing, and then it just cuts out, and that's like your teaser for Nina Simone. And then at the end of the movie, he fulfills it by actually having her sing, and I just really like that. But I forget what we were talking about. I guess Thomas Crown and his role in the story.
Yeah.
But I mean, like I said, I think I mentioned this already, but my favorite shot is the one where it's like Rene Russo is like if I were to steal a painting, I would have stolen that one. And it does this like perfectly composed shot of the painting, like perfectly centered. And then the camera just whips and like slides along Thomas's arm as he like leans in over it. And by doing that kind of gesture, he's like imposing power, like he has power over this object. And so he's like, "Do you want it?" And like you believe him. You believe that he could
Yeah.
get it for her if he wanted to. And it's just such a beautiful shot and
I,
movement, and I adore it. It's
I love
so
the culmination of the climax being, I agree with you. And obviously he steals that painting for her later on. But and like I love how in the climax it's all like proof of love. It's all like proof
Mhm.
of Thomas Crown had listened to literally everything Rene Russo had said. And Rene Russo remembers all the conversations because they have a
Yeah.
conversation about the Son of Man Magritte painting, and then all of a sudden everybody's wearing a fucking bowler cap. Like he hired
Yeah,
like
yeah,
50
he has
fucking
a sense of
Flash Magritte mob.
I
Like
mean, they said at the beginning that whoever did this has a sense of humor, and he does. He has like he does all of this with like an air for comedy.
it's like
He's
a really interesting trip down memory lane at the end of the movie. It's almost like the part of the slasher movie where, like on Friday the 13th, where she just runs into every single
well,
person who died. And like
it's
we're going through
yeah,
the
that's actually true. That's true. I also think I like the misdirection because obviously the setup for the sequence is that Thomas is supposed to be returning the painting. And it's supposedly in the suitcase he's carrying that you later find out it was never in there. But he because of this, the whole scene, with all its drama, it's playing one of the greatest jazz standards of all time,
Mhm.
the most iconic version of it. And it's so exhilarating to watch. But then at the end, they pull the rug out because you've been looking in this direction the whole time, because that's what everything about the setup for the scene led you to assume is that I'm supposed to be looking over here. And then you literally see the camera just pan to the left and you realize the painting he was stealing was a different one the whole time. Like the
Yeah.
heist was something completely different. And it was like all this energy and action and movement and excitement. It was all for the thing on the other side of the room that none of us were looking at. And I just really love that. I think it's really funny because it's almost like taking the
Which
piss out
could
of
speak
itself.
to like the idea of like our middle-aged like woman as the ultimate sex symbol of the film. Like
Mhm.
it's not necessarily who is normally focused on as being like beauty stolen up. So that's kind
Yeah.
of cool too. Fuck, I was gonna say, well, take this with a grain of salt because I haven't seen the original, but this film has a
Yeah.
lot to say about forgeries. It has a lot to say
Yeah.
about like
It's very
painting over a pre-existing painting and seeing
Elsian.
something crude underneath it. Like it's had a
and
lot to
and that
say about
itself
that.
is a thematic thing, like these ghosts. It's kind of like a ghost in the machine thing, like this interiority that everyone is unaware of, that's first introduced when he returns, or when they take a fake Monet from his office and then find
Yes.
out that that there's a hidden painting underneath and they call it a ghost. And then later, that's the Chekhov's gun for the ending, which is that the real painting was underneath one all along. And again, it's these things about like surfaces and what's actually under the surface. And so Thomas Crown lives in a world where everything is the surface. Everything is like the your job, your superficial qualities, and he's like craving something more meaningful, and that's what he finds with Rene Russo. And so that's why I said earlier that's like I feel like the whole finale is Thomas Crown trying to teach people something, and it's like in a weird like almost like lesson of the day thing. It's like he's trying to teach them to search for something more than services. Does that make sense? It's like that's what he goes for at the end. He wants a relationship with a woman his own age, basically. He wants a
Hmm.
committed, real relationship.
Yes.
And his life and social standing and position in the world are kind of a roadblock to that. And he's forced to keep up this image of like a playboy and that kind of deeper more meaningful relationship is kind of out of his grasp and then he kind of reclaims it at the end. I don't know if that makes any sense, but I just feel like it's this recurring motif in the movie of like the services that everyone sees and then the kind of more meaningful thing underneath it that they become aware of by the end is
Yeah.
kind of and I feel like that is his concern because it's like and Rene Russo's too because she's a woman that like people see her and they're like you're hot and then but it's like there's more she wants out of life than that.
Well, I think it shows Thomas Crown's growth as a character and his ability to treat himself with like integrity isn't the right word, but maturity or like seriousness. Because
No,
like
yeah, that's definitely true.
the first time we see like underneath the Monet, right? It's like dogs playing poker, which
Yeah,
is like
Doug
a
playing
very
book.
stupid painting, and I think that shows he has a very like he doesn't take himself seriously. He doesn't really value himself too much, and then by the end, like the when the same thing happens, it's like the most prized art in the
Yeah.
fucking world.
Eh,
So like at that point, he sees himself as valuable because he has Rene
yeah.
Russo in his life. So it was like, why is
Yeah.
this movie saying so many things?
It's
It's
also funny
amazing.
because at the start of the movie, people are unimpressed with the painting.
Yeah,
The kids are unimpressed, and
it's only if you say how much it is the
yeah,
value.
and he
If
himself
you, which
with
shows that like currency fucking alienates people too. How's it? Oh
yeah.
man, I'm sorry for if I'm cutting
Well,
you off a lot. It's only
no,
because all
no.
this stuff is coming to
No,
mind,
it's
and it's like,
true. It's like
wow.
the more money he has, the more imprisoned he is. The less
Same with the painting, right? But the more
yeah.
sought after you become, but for superficial reasons.
And that's funny because the painting people only start appreciating it or desiring it after it's been stolen and returned. And so that's why
Hmm.
the end of the movie when it's revealed is so special. It's that suddenly the painting, it's the same painting. It doesn't look any different and nothing has changed, but it suddenly is more meaningful. People are paying attention to it more. Because there's even a scene where Dennis Leary is talking about how he doesn't give a shit about paintings. He's like, I'm
Yeah,
just doing
yeah.
this because it's my job. He's like, I don't fucking care about like a piece of paper with colors on it. He's like, it
Well,
doesn't,
and doesn't he say also that like, oh, my last job, like it was something serious, like he
yeah,
caught some child abusing murderer or something,
yeah,
like something's like, so he's saying that this isn't a very serious crime. It's
yeah.
some upper class fucking,
This is comparative.
misadventure.
Yeah, it's the art industry, which is the art industrial complex. It's like it's a money laundering
Which
scheme,
all these
and
decisions that McTiernan and like are making with Thomas Crown Affair seem so incidental, but they end up expressing a lot.
I mean,
There's a lot to it.
in a weird way that makes it feel like at the end of the movie people learn to appreciate art again and I'm like
Yeah.
thank you John McTiernan for teaching us how to appreciate art again. You know what I mean? Because it's like if I don't know when I watch this movie I'm like it's like that meme where it's like finally some real fucking food, like it's just so satisfying to watch and absorb, and I love
Even when
that.
they go out to their like private island and oh my God, a
the sh
bareback has never looked
yeah
more attractive than
the
on Rene
shot of her
Russo when
walking
Pierce
out.
is just staring at her.
Yeah, that like take that kind of tracking take of her walking down the hall smacks Pierce Brosnan's ass and then walks outside topless, and it's like, man, this is what the movies are
You can
about.
see that she's considering like a future with him in that
Yeah,
moment, and that's really cool. But I like when she, when she doesn't believe a paint, she doesn't look at the painting, she just throws it on the fire and burns it.
yeah,
Um, I think that's a very huge moment too, and the idea that Pierce sees it's the chase, it's not the item or like
yeah. They don't care.
it's the act itself, not the not the possession or something. It's cool.
Pierce Brosnan is literally the only person in this movie that actually cares about painting.
Yes.
He's literally the only person who has any interest in the medium. Everyone else is just there because they have to, and they're unmoved by it. And so it's really funny when she like kind of puts a like a period sign, a punctuation on that by tossing a painting in a fire. It's
That's such a beautiful little sequence. I love them at the fucking where they're in the Caribbean or some shit. I love
yeah.
them there. It's so nice. And it's so like globe-trotting James Bond-esque. Like there
Yes.
has to be deliberate
Yeah.
decisions made
Yeah.
to
No, I
inverse so much of Bond
absolutely
grammar. Yeah.
I absolutely believe that the what appear to be allusions to James Bond are deliberate allusions to James Bond.
Yes.
There's no way they're not. I mean, it's not even consistent with his other work. Even stuff like Last Action Hero didn't really do stuff like that. So I have to imagine that's on purpose. I mean, it feels like the whole movie really revolves around the dynamic of James Bond and the woman of the week, the woman for this
Yeah.
movie. This time it's this actress, this time it's this singer, and it's like it's kind of cyclical and meaningless, and you stop feeling like James Bond's relationships have any significance, and then this movie is like actively critiquing that by being like, no, like a hot 40 something man can in
And
fact
imagine if a Bond girl had agency. Like it
yeah.
becomes one of the most interesting thrillers ever.
Or what
Like,
if she was the hero?
yeah, exactly.
What if she was the main character of the movie? What if
What if Eva Green was the star of
yeah.
Casino
I was
Royale?
trying to remember any of them.
It'd be amazing.
Octopussy or whatever their fucking names are. Pussy Galore. What if Pussy Galore was the main character?
Okay. It's just so cool. It's so cool. Any more thoughts on it?
No, I mean, I really love it. I think it's a really exquisitely directed movie, and I think it like sat I think it might be I have the longest lasting relationship to Predator, but honestly I feel like more and more it seems like my favorite McTiernan, if only because it feels like it fulfills like so and brings together things from every different corner of his work, like the every movie up until that point felt like, you saw what he was trying to do, and then now he's like putting it all together. Like Die Hard, obviously, like the plot isn't the most significant thing there. It's about the mechanics and the motion. And then Predator, it's kind of like not as uh I guess I would say like poetically directed as Die Hard. It's not as like refined in the way it's edited and stuff as Die Hard is. And it's like and then like everything he learned Last Action Hero and Nomad and stuff like that. And Die Hard 3. And I just feel like he's like pulling it all together to just make a movie that feels like it's finished in a weird way. And which is funny because it's like I don't really know what the single thesis is. I just know this is a movie that has like 50 ideas it cares about, and it
Yeah.
kind of weaves them all together, links them all together. And so it's like when you like I said, like it's just good fucking food. You finish Thomas Crown Affair, and it's like I feel there was resolution, as far as like ideas were introduced and then followed through to their conclusion, and then the movie ends, and it's just whatever you feel about that is whatever you feel about that. And I just really love that. It feels like a really satisfying movie to watch.
I'm
Really,
very happy that you suggested that we talked about it because, I don't think I don't think I saw it before. I'd heard of it, but and I
yeah,
think it's a largely at this point forgotten film, and I hope more people check
absolutely.
it out and see it. Because
I
there's a lot to it.
I don't think I ever even heard of it till I was like 25. Like literally, I
I think
it's
I just remember Pierce doing these movies on the side that were kind of Bond-esque, like this one
yeah,
and the Taylor of Panama and After
yeah.
Sunset. I think I remember. Um, but I always just like because I'm sure that the advertising for this film made it look like a Bond movie. So I just probably assumed it was another Pierce Brosnan.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it was billed as like Pierce is the hero doing crazy shit.
Yeah,
Like, obviously, the more as you watch it, he's kept at a distance for most of the movie. He's
right.
literally right up till like the last 10 seconds basically is the only time where you feel like you really know what he's about finally, which is that he actually sincerely was pursuing a relationship with her. And that's not clear until the end. Like
It's
literally when they meet on the plane, that's when you're like, oh, he was serious, you know? Like that's the up until that point, you're like, yeah, maybe he's just like fucking off and leaving her behind. I totally believe that. And then you finally realize what he wants. Um, and I don't know. I'm just compelled by that. Pierce is hot. Renee's hot. They're all so hot. Renee is so hot in this.